Good afternoon, everybody. How's it been going? You guys tired yet? Got to be tired. Who did the 2 days before? Man, quite a few of you. It's hard to sit there all day long, isn't it? Listen to different topics. Well, welcome to Top 10 Windows Deployment Service Common Issues and How to Resolve Them. If you're not familiar with WDS, this is just the latest version of Remote Installation Service, or RIS. Now, it's been out for a few years now, so it's not brand new. It's just been refined a bit. First thing I wanted to share with you guys is you know that while I was here, we had an earthquake in Washington, D.C. And one of the delegates was kind enough to send me this picture. And I cracked up. I was in my room by myself just laughing. I thought that was hysterical. That's about what happened. One chair fell over. I've talked to my friends that are back home. They're like, nothing happened. The building shook for like 45 seconds. No pictures fell down, nothing. It was no big deal. So is James in the room? No, I wanted to thank you for that picture. I thought that was pretty funny. All right, so a little background information on myself. My name's Rhonda Layfield. I've been in IT for a long, long time. I spent the first 7 years in the U.S. Navy, where I started with computers. And I'm now a setup and deployment MVP and a desktop deployment product specialist. Anybody else wants to become a DDPS, I do have a free giveaway I'm going to talk about here in just a minute that will help you to get your DDPS. It's one exam, but that one exam is a bear. Do you have it? Is that what you're saying, yay? Yeah, one exam. You have to know everything there is to know about Windows Automated Installation Kit, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, Windows Deployment Services, and the big daddy, System Center Configuration Manager. You have to know everything about deployment on all of those products. I mean, the exam was just so vast over all of those. It was a lot of fun. This is what the giveaway is. I always like taking exams, especially when it's like my area of expertise. I'm like, oh, I wonder what they'll ask. And I think I spend more time at the end of the exam telling them why some of their questions were wrong and how none of the answers were 100% completely accurate. It just infuriates me, and I go on for paragraphs. They've never contacted me. I wonder why. I have a feeling I've gotten pretty well known up there with the deployment groups. Being an MVP, we get to go out to Redmond once a year and sit down with the guys who actually create the tools we work with. And we get to ask them questions about, why they did this with the tool or why they did that. And they tell us. We're not allowed to tell you, but at least they give us information. It's like, oh, well, we wonder because it looked really stupid the way you did that. And they're like, well, we had to do it like that because we tried something else and it broke this product and it broke that product. So that's what we ended up with. So it's kind of good to get that information. And then, of course, they love our feedback. Have any of you guys sat Johan or Michael's talks? The Swedish guys, the deployment gurus, these guys are incredible and brutal when it comes to Redmond. I mean, they crack me up sometimes at things they'll say, well, that's stupid. And the product teams just look at them, their eyes are big, and some of these kids are like 25 years old. And here are these people yelling at them that their product is stupid. And it's lots of fun to sit back and just watch. Most of the time, I don't have to say anything. They take care of all that for me. So I have one of these to give away. And is there anybody, there was a little blonde back there in the room. Is she still there? Or is she outside the door? Can you guys look and see? Hey, sound guy, is that the blonde girl? Is she still here? Hi there, could you do me a favor? I'm going to give this away at the end of the session, so if you guys want a chance to win it, if you'll pull out a business card or write your name on a piece of paper and then just kind of move it, pass them all in here, if you'd pick them up for me, I'd really appreciate that. And a couple times this week, I've forgotten to give this away. People are halfway out the door, and I'm like, oh, wait, stop. So it's y'all's job to remind me I'm supposed to give this away. All right, while you're doing that, I'm going to give you an overview as to what I'm going to cover. These are the top 10 issues that I see going into other people's environments all the time. I am self-employed, and most of my clients, a lot of you have heard me say this if you sat my other sessions, my clients are federal government agencies. I live in Washington, D.C., and most of them I roll out between 50,000 and 150,000 machines in one deployment cycle. So they're usually pretty big. And by the time I get there, they've usually tried to set things up. And I walk in the door and I'm like, whoa, who did this? And who did that? And it's like, y'all didn't look at the documentation at all. And they didn't. They just slap stuff up and think, oh, I can make it work. And they didn't. So I've got some little stories for you here. But that's where this came from, this list of things that I see done incorrectly often. So top 10. I'm going to start with infrastructure. So installation and configuration, and then how WDS talks to DHCP, some issues you can run into with DNS. And then we get to play with Windows pre-installation environment, WinPEs, show you which one's the best one to use and why. We'll create an operating system image, or I'll show you how to create an OS image. It takes too long to actually do it in these sessions. But I'll show you how to create a WDS capture, WinPE, and things that can go wrong with that. Permissions, I wanted to make sure that you guys had the permissions that you can set in one place, because I had to go all over, like 20 different documents to find all these permissions. So I wanted to get all the permissions for WDS and put it in one slide deck, so you guys have every permission you can set. I'm not going to cover every single one of them, but at least you'll have them in the slide deck when you get back, and it's pretty self-explanatory as to how to set those permissions. Some are done on registry keys, some are done on NTFS permissions, and some are done from within the WDS snap-in itself. Then I'll talk about pre-stage settings. If you're not familiar with pre-stage settings, I'll cover what that is and how to pre-stage a machine, and then we'll talk about why you can run into some issues with that. We'll hit multicast issues, automate the deployment, what happens when you rename or move a WDS server, and the last one I'm going to save as a surprise. Does anybody want to make any bets on whether I'm going to make it through and still have a voice at the end of this session? Did anybody sit my session yesterday afternoon? I was actually squeaking at the end of that. That was horrible. So I stayed in my room almost all day today. I didn't talk to anyone. I'm like, not going to say a word all day. I canceled all the interviews I was supposed to do today, hoping I would have a voice for just tonight. So tonight and then one more tomorrow morning. Let's cover some of the basics first. Now, how many of you guys have WDS installed right now? So I'd say it's about half the room. Awesome. So the other half, I'm going to start from the beginning so you guys aren't lost. You who have WDS already installed, give 30 seconds to get them up to speed so that they're on the same page with you and they can understand everything we're talking about here. So the first 30 seconds will be boring for you guys. WDS does have some requirements, and they're infrastructure requirements. So you'll notice what I have here. So I have a DHCP server, domain controller running DNS, and a WDS server. I also have a bare metal machine with no operating system whatsoever on it. Hey, you guys, there's some seats right up front and some seats over there if you feel like sitting down. I don't know if you can see those from back there. And I get asked all the time, can I run all this on one machine? I'm doing it now. In the real world, you're not going to want to run WDS on your domain controllers. They're probably going to be busy enough as it is. Can you use a Linux DHCP server? Let me ask you, can you use a Linux? Well, I'm not sure about the options. Options 60, 66, and 67 you can set. If you can set those, you can use it. All right, so what's going to happen? Bare metal machine, you boot that guy up, no OS at all. The first thing he's going to do is get an IP address from the DHCP server. And any options you've set up, like who the DNS server is, you can go look for those SRV records to find out who the domain controllers are, because you are going to have to authenticate against the domain controller. Then you'll check in with WDS, boot a WinPE, and get a list of operating system images to boot from. Installing WDS, this is a free product that ships with the server operating system. So it's not going to cost you anything extra. There are no client access licenses you have to be concerned with. It ships right there, just like Riz did in the old days. Did anybody use Riz? Wow, that was a difficult product, especially to learn from the beginning. There was no user interface or anything for it. That was kind of a toughie. So at least with WDS, we do have a snap-in that we can go in and graphically add things to it. When we configure WDS, the only a couple things we have to do is tell it where we want to store our images, set up our DHCP options, and then tell it the Pixie server settings. Now, I am curious, has anybody looked at the WDS documentation? A couple people. The first time I read it, I thought I had to have 4 servers, because it talked about the WDS server being a WDS server, a Pixie server, a, what's that? Transport server, and there's another one. Not a deployment server. Boy, and it just went right out of my head. Gotta love antihistamines. I'll think about it later. But it made it appear like you had to have 4 servers running these roles. It didn't tell you all of these are actually WDS roles. So it calls the same machine 4 different things. A little confusing. Let's take a look at configuring WDS first. And of course, that's not right. This is the one demo that I honestly don't think is going to work. I'll see if I can fool it. Nope. Tell you what I'm going to do. This was the one VM that was acting up, and it wouldn't, the trust relationship between it and the DC were not happy. So I'm going to do this, let it do its own thing for just a couple minutes, and I'm going to move on. That's better. All right, I am going to come back to that because I can cover DHCP and then come back and show you configuring. It's really only about 3 pages, but there is a reason why I want to show you how to configure it. All right, so let's talk about DHCP first, and we'll back up just a bit. Has anybody ever heard of the DORA process when it comes to DHCP? A couple people. That's good. Most people haven't. What I have is a bare metal machine and DHCP running on the WDS server. So what happens when the guy boots up is he sends over a discover packet to DHCP saying, hey, I discovered I need to get an IP address from you. DHCP offers him an IP address and also tells him, by the way, I am the Pixie server also, which means the WDS server. He requests that the IP address that was offered to him is assigned to his MAC address for the least duration. And then the server acknowledges for this period of time you will be known as whatever the IP address is. So that's our DORA process. Has anybody ever seen it in a network monitor trace? All right. More than one person. That's wonderful. This is my favorite tool. I love NetMon. This is what it looks like. There's your discover packet, their offer, request, and acknowledgement. So I didn't make it up. DORA actually exists. It's just an easy way to remember the packets and the sequence of them. Let's pop in on that member server real quick. It's coming back up. Now, how many of you guys have one subnet? All your servers and all your clients are on one subnet. One person, 2 people, 3, 4, 5. That's more than I usually get. Most people don't have everything on one subnet. And because all of your DHCP traffic is broadcast traffic, multiple subnets can introduce some problems. So how are you going to find out who the WDS server is and who the DHCP servers are? Here's the issue. Both of these services listed on UDP port 67. So they both broadcast out to UDP port 67. Any machine that has that port open or that door open will pick up the packet and listen to it. But it's all done by broadcast. So how do you get around that? We've got 3 different scenarios. WDS and DHCP on the same subnet, but they're on different servers. Broadcasting works fine there. WDS and DHCP on different subnets. I'll show you how we have to set options 66 and 67 so our clients can find the WDS servers. And the last one is WDS and DHCP on the same server. These 2 don't share UDP port 67. So you have to let one of the services have it, but then that service has to tell the clients about the other service, which is where we're going to go in and configure option number 60. So this is looking at WDS and DHCP on the same subnet, but different servers. Broadcast goes out to both of these machines. DHCP makes an offer. He's the only one that has a scope. He's the only one that has any IP addresses he could offer. This guy makes an offer too. But in the offer packet, there's no IP address. All that's in the offer packet, and this is kind of strange, it says Pixie client. You would think it would say Pixie server, but it doesn't. The data in the packet itself says Pixie client, but that's telling the Pixie client that he is the Pixie server. Sends a request packet to DHCP and an acknowledge. Then you get your list of Windows pre-installation environments, WinPEs, and a list of operating system images to choose from that you've previously added to WDS. This is WDS and DHCP on different subnets. We send our Discover packet over. DHCP sends back an offer, but he also gives him options 66 and 67. 66 is telling it the name of the WDS server, and 67 tells it the file it's supposed to boot for Pixie. We do our request, our acknowledgement, we get our list of WinPEs, and we get our list of operating system images to deploy. WDS and DHCP on the same server. There's our Discover packet. The offer has option 60 set, which is saying I'm also the WDS server or the Pixie server. You request, acknowledge, and then I didn't tell you the whole story. What you get here is not a DORA, you get a DORA do. And it looks really strange in a network trace when you look and you're like, okay, this server is giving an offer to this client. DHCP is not running on that machine. Well, if WDS is running on it, it piggybacks on the DHCP protocol. So the offer to talk to the client and tell him he's the WDS server is actually a Discover packet. So it's a Discover from the client and then the offer. And what's really strange is in that first offer coming from this server, that Pixie client field is filled in also. It's just not read by the client here. So it has to wait until the actual DORA do to read that piece of information. Then you get your WinPEs and you get your operating system images. This is the screen you'll see during configuration of WDS if you install WDS on a machine that's currently running DHCP. So what you have to do is tell it, do not listen. You're telling WDS, don't listen on UDP port 67, and go ahead and configure DHCP option 60. Set it to Pixie client. So some issues that I've seen out there, true story. I went into an environment last November. Hadn't been able to Pixie boot their deployments since March of that year. Couldn't figure out why. In some of these environments, they're so large that they have one team that takes care of DHCP and maybe infrastructure. They're DHCP DNS guys. Somebody else takes care of WDS, and there's a whole other team that takes care of Active Directory. And these guys never like each other for some reason. They never communicate when they change things, and I don't understand what the problem is. It's almost like they're trying to needle each other. So what happened in this scenario is the infrastructure team took down, it decommissioned an old DHCP server, brought up a new DHCP server, and they forgot to set the options that were needed for WDS. So it broke their deployments. Since March. So the first thing I did, within the first 3 minutes, I got that fixed. I was like, wow, you guys have not been able to Pixie boot for this long. That's insane. So that is something that I have seen, and it does happen more often than you would think it does. Let's go check in on that member server real quick. All right, if you haven't seen the WDS snap-in, this is what it looks like for that first time. And it's always a good sign when you see your server listed under there. We're not worried about the little yellow yield sign. That's okay, we're going to take care of that. But it's always a bad sign, like you guys saw when I came in here before, and it had servers, and I tried to add the local server, and it said no. So that's usually a bad sign when you don't see your server pop in here. To configure him, I'm going to right-click and choose Configure Server. And this is just a little reminder you need Active Directory, DNS, DHCP, and an NTFS partition to store your images on. That's what this screen is reminding you. Tell it where you'd like to store your images. I never put them on the same drive as my operating system. That guy's busy enough, so put them on another drive, and you're going to be amazed at how much hard drive space you eat up really, really, really quickly. The main reason for that is WDS can only deploy fat images. So images that have all your applications in them. And it's not abnormal to have a 15 gig image. And if you have fat images, you're going to have multiple images to send out to different clients, maybe different departments, different groups of people. So you'll end up with 3, 4, 5, 6, 15 images immediately. So really think about how much hard drive space it's going to take. And as you can see, this machine does have DHCP installed on it. So all I need to do is tell WDS, don't list it on port 67, and go ahead into my DHCP options and configure 60 for me. I don't want to have to go do that. Then we have our Pixie server initial settings. So who should this server talk to? Which clients? Well, you can set it up for, well, don't respond to anybody yet. I don't have anything in there. I don't have any boot images. I don't have any operating system images. So for now, just don't respond to anybody. Or you can choose respond only to known client computers. Those are computers that are pre-staged in Active Directory, and I'm going to show you how to pre-stage when we get to that part. But this is my favorite. Respond to client computers known and unknown, but for unknown machines that have not been pre-staged in Active Directory, require administrator approval. And what that would do is if you have a machine, I don't know, someone's sitting on a wireless laptop out in the parking lot trying to download one of your images, they're not going to be able to. If they Pixie boot their machine, it could even get DHCP information from you and talk to the WDS server. What would happen is they'd sit at that black screen, and they would get these little dots every 5 seconds to come across when it checks in with WDS server to find out, have I been approved? If you haven't been approved, it just keeps going and going and going. I know that because I went to lunch one day, long lunch, like 2.5 hours. I came home, and there was like screens of just dot, 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 dot. I was like, wow, I didn't know it would just keep doing it. So, what's that? Yeah, you really did, but it didn't. So what you'd have to do is go into the WDS snap-in, and you would then see pending devices. And if there were more than one, you'd see the first one would be number 1, second would be number 2, and you'd be able to right-click and say approve or reject. And if you say reject, it'll reboot that machine. If you say approve, then it gets a list of WinPEs and a list of operating system images to deploy. I'm going to leave this set to respond to all client computers known and unknown. And you saw that last little, I'd already used that shared folder name. Come on. Okay, I'm downing this machine anyway. What should have happened is you should now see this guy that's fully configured. See the little green arrow? That's what it should have changed to after you've configured it. So now what we're looking at is a fully configured WDS server. And then I can go in and add my WinPE images, my boot images. To add those, you just simply right-click and tell it to add a boot image and then browse to where that boot image is. Either one you've created, which I don't recommend, or one off of the Windows 7 DVD. For your installation images, what we have here is something called image groups. And image groups are nice. They save you a lot of hard drive space. So the purpose of an image group is if you have a Windows 7, let's say 64-bit image, and it has all the applications for marketing in it, and you input it into an image group. You create an image group, just call it Windows 7 64-bit. And then you put a second Windows 7 64-bit image with different applications in it into the same image group. Something called single instancing wakes up, and it looks at every single file you want to put in that image group. If it's already there, it won't store it again. It just puts a pointer to it. So think about all those core operating system files. Remember, both of those were 64-bit. It won't do you any good to put 32 and 64 in the same image group. You can technically, but you're not going to get any hard drive savings out of it. So go ahead and create image groups for 32-bit images and then different ones for 64-bit. And I also put my Windows 7 images in one image group and server in another. All right, while we're here, let me show you the DHCP options. Because they're a little strange the first time you set these guys up. 60 is a piece of cake. This is what your 60 option looks like. That's kind of strange. Oh, it's set as a server option. There we go. So all you have to do is put a check mark in the box for a Pixie client. You don't have to even type in Pixie client. It automatically puts that string in there for you. Not so with 66 and 67. With those guys, 66, you're going to input the name of the server. The fully qualified domain name. With 67, this is the one I like to cheat on. This guy, I'm going to go over into my remote install folder, boot, let's say it's 64-bit clients, find the Pixie boot. We'll go with just the standard pixieboot.com. Right-click, I'm going to open the properties, and I just don't like typing all this stuff in. That's what it looks like to fill in 67. You have to tell it the exact file it's supposed to Pixie boot. And if you guys notice there's a pixieboot.in12 there, that automates the Pixie boot so no one has to hit F12. So there are a couple different Pixie boot files you can choose. But that's how you'd figure options 60, 66, and 67. NBP.com, let's see. Because what that actually is the network boot program. That's NBP. There's BCD. I don't see .NBP on this one, but you can add any Pixie boots that you want to WDS. You can extend it if you choose. EFI? WDS NBP, that's just the, that's what it was. This is also a network boot server, an NBS. That just stands for the NBP. And it depends on your hardware that you have as to which one you have to choose. I know that this one works 95% of the time. This one, you can automate, and depending on some different types of hardware that you have out there and how BootP is configured, you might have to go with the network boot program, not the Pixie boot. And then there's also additional ones you can add to it, but that's hardware related for your switches and infrastructure. All right. Next topic, to make sure we finish on time, there's a party to get to. So the next topic is WDS and DNS. And what I've run into is problems when I have DNS running on a machine and then I install WDS on it as well. So DNS is already running there. And what it does, it goes in and it grabs this big block of ports to hand out to its clients. Well, WDS wants to use those same ports. So what happens here is when your clients boot up on that Pixie screen, black screen, they hit F12, they'll get this little 4011 error message that it can't communicate with the WDS server because WDS can't hand it any ports in order to communicate with it. So what you have to do is you have to go in and change your ports for WDS to use. So we're back in the WDS snap-in. And which one am I going to? There we go, network. These are the ports that WDS will hand out to the client machine. So those are the source ports to have the conversation on. Remember, they're going to UDP 67. That's the destination port, not the source port. And so what you have to do is come in here, if you encounter that issue, and just change this to 5 and change this guy to 6, so you're using a different blocks of ports for WDS. Quick fix. All right, now one of my fun ones. The WinPEs. Who's created your own WinPE? Who put it on a WDS server and tried to boot it? How'd that work for you? Not well. Yeah, doesn't work well. I'm going to show you guys why. So you can create your own WinPE using the Windows Automated Installation Kit, do that little copy PE and then tell it the architecture, 32 or 64-bit. Or you can use the WinPE found on a Windows 7 SP1 or Server 2008 R2 SP1 DVDs or ISO files. Those are actually the ones you want to use. And you always want to use the latest and greatest. So when the next version of Windows 7 comes out, or Server, you want to make sure that you get the latest version of the boot.wim file out of the sources folder. That's the one you really want. Talked about the most recently used. If you accidentally use a Vista or an old Vista SP1, this is what you're going to get. You're about 3/4 of the way through the deployment, and then it's going to error out for you with this beautiful little hex error message there. So you've used the wrong WinPE. It's just the older WinPEs don't know about the newer operating system, so they can't deploy them. Always use the latest and greatest. Now, how many of you guys have started playing around with DISM, Deployment Image Servicing Management? How fun is that tool? It's like writing a book every time you want to do something, and autocomplete doesn't work. So I'm going to show you guys what I do, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use DISM to show you some information about these two WinPEs. You're going to see something different very quickly. The way you start is you use the Deployment Tools command prompt. You can use a regular command prompt, but then you have to type in the complete path to where these tools live. That's why if you use the Deployment Tools command prompt, which gets installed when you install the Windows Automated Installation Kit, it edits the path statement in your environment variables, so you don't have to type in the path, the big ugly path to all the tools. So DISM is this wonderful new tool that allows you to manage your images. Allows you to mount them, make changes, inject drivers, inject applications, change Windows components that are there, enable firewalls, set up TCP/IP stacks. You can do everything with DISM. What you can't do with DISM is you cannot create or apply images. You still have to use ImageX for that. DISM has no way to create or apply. So what I have here is I have two WinPEs. This is a WinPE WIM that I created myself using the Wake, and this is a boot.wim from Windows 7 DVD. Now you guys notice from this help file, look at how big these commands are. Get mounted WIM information. And those little dashes will drive you nuts as to where's the dash supposed to go. It drives you crazy. So what I do, if I want to get information about a WIM, I see it's get-wim info. So that's not the whole story there. Oh, wow, I like that. The girl who did this is like a 23-year-old, just started with Microsoft, and this help file rocks. It is fantastic what she's done with it. So I love all the examples that you get, but I still don't want to type that out. So what I do is need that. Pipe it out to a text file. Let's just name it I can open that, just come on in here and edit it to do whatever I want it to do and add my path. So I don't have to type everything out. And you guys are going to do the same things over and over and over again. Every time you use DISM, you're using the exact same commands. So just the first time you do it, build yourself a cheat sheet. That's what I always do, because 3 months later when I have to go back and do it again, I hate having to start all over from scratch and start piping out those text files again. It's just really annoying. So what I've done is I have my cheat sheet here. And I already have my DISM get WIM information. One is on that WinPE WIM. So I'll just copy and paste him out there. This is the information it's telling me. So in the WinPE that I created, there is one image. Now you guys know you can store multiple images inside a WIM file. Reasons to do that? Maybe you have a server that has two partitions or volumes or 3. Image X can only create a WIM of one partition at a time. So if you had 3 partitions, you're going to have 3 WIM images. You can put them inside the same WIM file so that you know those guys go together. But then you have to apply 3 WIM images. Has anybody started playing around with VHDs yet? That gets you a snapshot of the entire drive. So you could have multiple images inside a VHD, and that is the direction we're moving. All right, so that's a little bit interesting. Let's look at the boot.wim. Oh, check that out. So what we saw here was in the WinPE.wim, I have one image index number 1. In the next one, how many images do I have inside that guy? 1, 2. So there's a big difference already. But if you want to see what the difference is, we're going to mount these guys and take a peek at what they look like once they're mounted. Now, WinPEs are pretty small, so it doesn't take a long time for these to mount. When you start mounting operating system images that actually include OSs, applications, and all kinds of things you've added to it, those can take a while to be mounted. So that guy worked all right. Let's go grab our second one so we can compare them. All right, those guys are both mounted. Who's never seen a mounted WIM image? A few of you? I think this is so cool. I love this. So one I mounted to the boot folder, and one I mounted to that WinPE folder. So the one in the WinPE folder is the WinPE I created. This is the one that's on the Windows 7 DVD. You guys see any files that may be important to perform the installation of an operating system? You have to have setup.exe, and there's a lot more in the sources folder. Notice we don't even have a sources folder over here. So what this ends up looking like, if I boot the WinPE that I created, that's what it looks like. I'm sitting at a WinPE screen. I don't have a list of operating systems to choose, and it's not going to go anywhere until I tell it what to do. And I can't connect to my WDS server from here. If I boot the WinPE boot.wim, that's what you're supposed to see. So that's the reason why you want to add the boot.wim from Windows 7 SP1 DVD sources folder as a boot image to WDS, because this is where you will start, and this is the WDS client for deployment. You just answer a few questions. What language would you like to perform this in? What kind of partitioning do you want to do? How many volumes would you like? How do you want to format it? And you just walk through the deployment wizard itself. So I think this is one of the first things that people got confused with WDS. They got excited they could create their own WinPEs, but then they just sat there on that black screen and they never got any operating system images. So if you've done that in the past, now you know why and what's going on under the hood there. All right, WinPE and architectures. Because you do have the option of a 32-bit or a 64-bit WinPE, So if you boot a 32-bit WinPE, you can install both 32 and 64-bit installation images. If you boot a 64-bit WinPE, you can only deploy 64-bit OSs. So this is the same as MDT now, which really what they're saying is you don't need 64-bit WinPEs any longer. In the past, if you wanted to install a 64-bit OS image, you had to have a 64-bit WinPE. But now they have it set so we can just do 32-bit WinPEs, and from that we can deploy 32 or 64-bit operating systems. All right, the next topic is creating an operating system image using WDS to create it. You'll use the WDS capture WinPE you create, very simple to create. First thing you'll do is add that boot.wim from Windows 7 or Server 2008, ISO or DVD. Right-click the boot.wim from within the WDS snap-in and just choose Create Capture Image. It'll create a new WinPE that automatically launches the WDS Capture Wizard. You'll need to sysprep your client machines. And you need to sysprep on XP in 2003 using the reseal switch. If it's Windows 7 or Server 2008, you need to use the generalized switch. If you don't, this is a scenario you can run into. You have no volume to capture. You can't type. People are smiling. Y'all have done this, haven't you? This one took me like 3 days to figure out because I'm like, what happened? I don't understand. And I'll show you the next page. There were some things that blew me away on that one too. But this is not what you want to see. Let me show you first of all what I'm booting. Give you the whole story. Get rid of these guys. Back to our WDS snap-in. Under boot images, what I did is I took the WinPE, boot.wim, right-click, chose Create Capture Image, told it what I wanted to name it, where I wanted to put it. Then I got WDS Capture WinPE created. Then I booted that as my WinPE on the Windows 7 machine. So that's what we're looking at now, is that WDS Capture utility. And notice, I have a D volume. Drove me nuts why nothing showed up and you can't type anything in there. So it's either you sysprepped it correctly and you'll see your volumes listed, or you didn't sysprep it correctly. You can give it an image name, description, and then this page makes it look like you have choices, but you don't. You don't have any choices here. Name and location. So where do you want to put it? Locally. And then do you want to upload the image to the WDS server? What's the server name? And then as soon as you connect to the server name, you'll get all your image groups listed. That's how you know everything's working properly. Your image groups pop up in that bottom box. Well, I didn't want to store it locally. I thought just put it on the WDS server. So I told it just to upload the image to the WDS server and look at the next button. See how it's not selectable? You can't do that. You must store it locally and then have it copied across the network to the WDS server. The reason for that is when you do create an image and you tell it right at the beginning, create an image and put it on a server across the network, verification gets turned on. And it's going to take you about 5 times longer to verify all the packets that come across to create that image. So it's a lot faster. This is really doing you a favor. It's a lot faster to go ahead and create that image locally on that machine. And yes, you can put it on the C drive. And no, the WIM file will not be in the image. It's smart enough to know not to do that. But then it'll just copy as a regular file copy on up to the WDS server. All right, next topic is permissions. Of course, enterprise admins, domain admins have full control to everything, but we really shouldn't be using those in WDS scripts. The main reason is because they're in clear text, and there's nothing you can do about that. So you want to make sure you use least privilege rules here. Local administrator on the WDS server has full control to your folder where you're storing everything for WDS. I stuck with the default name of remote install and full control on HKey local machine system in the registry. For admin approval, the computer account's actually created using the server's authentication token, not the admin's. So the WDS server $ has to have the create computer account objects on the container OUs where the approved pending computers will be created. Remember in the Pixie settings where we looked at apply to all known and unknown client computers, but for unknown, request approval? That's what this is setting up. Admin approval of pending computers. You also have to go in and give them read-write permissions to that remote install MGMT folder. That's where the little tiny database, little binary MDB sits in there, and that's where all of your pending requests will sit until you've done something with them. You can also go into Active Directory users and computers and delegate a task to write all properties on computer objects. But at that point, any users that you set up through a delegation in Active Directory can now create computer objects and they can join machines to the domain. Well, if you want to be a little bit more secure, you can go into Active Directory and you can pre-stage your computers, which I promised I will show you, and I will stick to that. But sometimes we don't want users to be able to create computers. So what we want is the admins to go into Active Directory, create the computers. And then the user account that's used to actually perform the deployment, all they need to be able to do is join the machine to the domain, not create the computer object. So that's what we're talking about here. And it's not pretty. You get to go in and play with the registry. And there's actually two parts to this. So you guys will notice where I am, and you'll have access to these slide decks, so I don't think I need to read it to you all the way down. But the key is named join rights. The type is a D word. And then the value you input, if you input 0, then it means they're only going to be able to join machines to the domain. Input a value of 1, and it means they'll be able to create computer objects and join machines to the domain.
What happens if you've gone and turned off the ability to join that
If you've set it up so they can't join those 10 machines to the domain, then you're going to want to pre-stage because they wouldn't be able to create computer accounts or join machines to the domain. You're going to want to pre-stage, and the user account, the one account that you're going to use, it's going to be on the next page here. This is where you're going to put it. It's going to be a special account that you set up, kind of like a service account. So that account will be in part 2. You're down in the same registry hive. The name of the key is user, and the type is a reg size. Whatever user account or group you put in here, those users will get the permissions, the 0 or the 1, from the previous key. So whether they can do full, join machines, and create computer objects, or 0, only join machines. So this is where you would list that specific user account or group of users. And this is where I'm going to let you guys kind of spend some time going through and reading. Notice the first couple, pre-staging a computer. You're in Active Directory users and computers. Do you guys call it ADUC down here too? That doesn't confuse anybody? Okay, so that's in Active Directory. You can create a custom task delegation. You'd have to give it write all properties on computer objects. If you wanted to add or remove an image or image group, the user accounts allowed to do that would need to have full control NTFS permissions on the remote install images image group folder. And notice a few of these others are also NTFS permissions on certain folders within the remote install folder. If you want to be able to manage properties on an OS image, you need to have read-write on the folder where the image group resides. Is anybody running RIS and going to be converting to WDS? No? Oh, that's great. You've got RI prepped images that were created with RIS. What you can do on that machine is install WDS on the machine, and then you're running in something called legacy mode. You're kidding me. There's a patch that will turn RIS into WDS. Okay? When it comes time, so you don't have to create those old RI prepped images, if you did run that patch to turn RIS into WDS running in legacy mode, it'll still go ahead and hand out your RI prep images just fine, but then you'll take it to either mixed or native mode, take it to mixed mode, and then when you right-click your RI prep images, you can tell it to convert them to WIM images. All right, creating discover and capture images and creating a multicast transmission. What's a discover image? Do you know what it is?
Discover image allows you to connect to the WDS server where you don't have DHCP.
DHCP or Pixie. Pixie's not allowed in your environment too. That's perfect. So there are some environments out there where their infrastructure team says, we don't allow Pixie. You can't use WDS here. Sure you can. You can use a discover image, and it's just a WinPE, but then you have to take that WinPE out to the desktop client machines and boot them using that WinPE, and then they can connect to the WDS server. So it's a little bit more work, but they still would be able to use WDS. All right. The next topic is pre-stage settings are ignored. And this is where I'm going to show you what pre-staging looks like. If you haven't done it before, I'm going to open Active Directory Users and Computers. I'm going to create a new computer object. Give it a name. This is what makes it pre-staged. Tell it it's a managed computer, and then input either the GUID, the UID, or the MAC address. You have to have 32 characters in here, so a MAC is only 12. You're going to have to add some zeros to the front of that. And when I used to do these, when I first started demoing this, I would say, okay, I'd put the MAC address in, no dashes. So take the dashes out, put the MAC address in, and then just start putting zeros in. Watch the next button. You don't have to count. There, that's the right number of characters to have in there. Because if you put one more, oh, it's gone. So just go ahead and just watch the next button, put your zeros in until you've got the right number. And this is actually a 2008 R2 SP1 server, and I know it still says RIS. I'm sure they're going to fix this at some point. You see the top up there? Specify the remote installation server. That really means the WDS server. So you can tell it that whenever this client requests an operating system image, you can tell it which server to go to, which I think is fantastic for branch offices. You don't want your clients going across some WAN link to talk to the guy at the corporate office. If you have a WDS server locally, tell those clients to always go local to the WDS server to get those images. And this is something you just set up one time. So that's pre-staged. Now, what kinds of problems can you run into with pre-staging? You have to make sure you don't have duplicate machine accounts pre-staged for the same machine. Well, what if you have them in different OUs? What if you pre-stage a machine using the MAC address, then you swap that NIC to another machine? What if you have dueling admins? The first admin, they're trying to help each other. They really are. The first admin creates a computer object in Active Directory Users and Computers. The second one goes in and pre-stages using a NIC or a GUID. The first one found is used. So if somebody goes in and pre-stages a computer account using a GUID, somebody else does it using the NIC, somebody else does another one using the universally unique ID, the first one it finds is the one it's going to use, which can cause you some problems if you've gone in and set up for it to go to specific servers to get their images from. Start that again.
On that pre-staging, I thought that was the nice thing about the later versions of this, that you've got that name and approve option in the administrator console, so you do it all in one. Type in the name and it automatically pre-stages on the computer.
So exactly what he's talking about is the feature he likes. I told you that when somebody has a ping device, they can either approve or reject, but they can also name and approve. So what he's talking about is if you did have a client that was an unknown client and you've set your Pixie settings to say, only allow known clients to get operating system images. Any unknown clients, they have to be approved. They would be listed in here under pending devices. And you would right-click, and if you chose approve, then they're going to get a list of OS images. If you chose reject, it's going to restart their machine. If you choose name and approve, it names the computer, object, and Active Directory users and computer and pre-stages it for you. So that's what he's talking about, the name and approve. All right, are there any other questions before we move into multicast? I think my voice might make it. All right, multicasting traffic. Well, with Server 2008, we found out there were some problems. Maybe it wasn't done as well as it could have been done. So this is a multicast proprietary protocol that Microsoft has created themselves. It's not the normal everyday IGMP that we're used to when it comes to multicast. 2008 WDS, what we had was if you multicasted, everybody went into one great big bucket. All the clients were in just one big stream of multicast traffic, and the slowest client would dictate the speed for everybody else. Think about just a switch that's misbehaving or a router that's dropping packets. He's going to slow everything down for every single client out there. So with Server 2008 R2, they decided to have 3 streams of multicast traffic. It's not enabled by default, but it's there if you want to go enable it. So the default behavior is still one great big bucket for everybody. But you can go in and tell it, everybody starts in the fast bucket. If they drop below a certain bandwidth, they go into the medium. If they drop below another bandwidth, they go to the slow. Now, it's still true that the slowest client will dictate the speed for everybody else in that bucket. But the nice thing you can do is when you do have multicast transmissions, you will get a list of all clients that are participating in that transmission. And you can check out their speeds. In fact, it's really cool here. You can click on any one of these column headings and sort it by the column heading. So you can find out which one's the fastest, which one's the slowest. And then if you would like to, you can right-click and kick him out. Say, kick that guy back to unicast, or just abort the installation altogether. So get the slowest guy out of there so everybody else can pick back up again. Now what actually happens with multicast is those clients will get an IP address from the DHCP server, but then they also get a multicast IP address. Notice in the first octet, my number is 239. That goes by just standard TCP/IP RFCs for numbering. So anything that's 239 or above, until you get to D's and E classes, would be a multicast IP address. So your clients will get an additional IP. That's how the server knows that he's got multicast clients out there. And when he creates that one data packet, let's say some of these, have you guys done network traces to see how many packets it takes to get some of these images out there? I've seen like 750,000 packets for one image. But look at it, it's like a 15 gig file that's being copied out there, so you get tons and tons of packages. So what can happen is that server is going to create packet number 1 of the image, and he's going to blast it out to all the multicast clients that he's aware of based on their IP addresses. So he only has to create packet 1 once, send it out to everybody. And then packet 2, send it out to everybody. Instead of unicast, back where it was packet 1 created for the client 1. Packet 1 created for client 2. Packet 1 created, the overhead on the server was a lot more. But one thing I don't quite understand, and they refuse to tell me, is it's really slow. If you've just got like 5 or 6 clients and you do multicast, I'd rather shoot myself in the foot. It takes 10 times longer than doing unicast to those clients. And I've done network traces. They won't release the parsers for WDS. In fact, the last time I was at Redmond, the PM for WDS came over and sat beside me. But he didn't just sit beside me. He made them move chairs, and he brought a chair and sat right smack beside me and watched everything I typed. Because I've been asking him, I'm like, guys, I need the parser for WDS. They're like, no, we can't give it to you yet. There's this thing with DOJ now that I guess they have to give the government a certain piece of the intellectual information for new protocols that are created, and that hasn't been done yet. So they won't release the parsers, and if you don't have the parser, you can't read the data packets in Network Monitor. So eventually we'll get there. Another point here for multicast is every time you install WDS, you get the same little bank of IP addresses to hand out. Well, that's not good. Then you're going to have multiple clients out there with the same multicast IP addresses. So what you'll need to do is if you have two WDS servers that are going to do multicast, go in here and change so that one can go 239.001 to 239.00100, and the other one picks up at 101 and goes through 200, or whatever you want to set it to. But break up what the IP addresses are going to be. And this is where I told you that one stream of multicast traffic, this is your default setting. Keep all multicast clients in a session at the same speed. You have your other options here. Separate clients into 3 sessions. You can go to 2 sessions and automatically disconnect clients below a certain bandwidth. All right, number 3, automating the deployment so you don't have to walk through that deployment wizard every single time you're going to perform a deployment. What I hear most often, people create one script and they can't figure out why it doesn't work because you have to have 2. You have to create 2 separate scripts. One will take care of everything in the WinPE phase of the installation. In that phase, you're telling it what language you want to perform the installation in, how you want to partition the drives, everything you would set up before you actually install the OS. And then in Specialize and UBI, out-of-box experience, phases 4 and 7, then you would set up everything for the computer name, the time zone, things like that. So WDS requires both scripts, or it ignores the existence of either. Who's used Windows System Image Manager? All right. I'm going to open one of these scripts. If you currently have a script that will perform a complete deployment, what you can do, what I've done in the past, is open that script, delete everything you set up in Pass 4 and Pass 7, do a file save as, and save that as your WinPE portion, and then open the same script again, delete everything in WinPE, so all you have left is everything in Pass 4 and Pass 7, and do a save as. There you got your 2 scripts. So if you already have scripts out there, you don't have to go recreate them for this. But I do want to show you just quickly what it would look like. In a Windows System Image Manager script. I just like to call it WSIM. And I am cheating. I'm going into MDT here and just opening up a script that MDT created for me. There we go. For those of you who haven't seen WSIM, this is what it looks like. This is your answer file. And your answer file, you can actually go through 7 different phases or stages of an installation. Those stages are called configuration passes. So that's what we're looking at here. This is our WinPE pass, offline servicing for patching, generalized, specialized, audit system and audit user. Most of the time, those are used for OEMs. In fact, this tool was created for OEMs. They've had it for like 15 years. So it was actually created for them, and they've just over the last few years started handing it out to us. And then the last phase is the 7, or the UBI, the out-of-box experience. So what you would end up doing is coming down here and finding components you want to add. Maybe you want to change the DNS suffix search order. You would add that to your answer file. And then you could come over here and highlight what the search order should be and input all the DNS suffixes. So that's how you would create the answer file. Or you can use MDT's deployment wizard, walk through this really friendly wizard that asks about 7 questions and creates this for you. And even then, I can still come in here and edit it like I'm doing right now, so I can make any changes I choose later on. So once you have your 2 scripts, Back to WDS. On the Boot tab, you can go down and choose which WinPE script you want to add for 32-bit or for 64-bit. That's your WinPE script that will be used. The script that gives the computer a name, IP address, time zone, that's actually done on the OS image itself. So this is a Windows 7 Ultimate image. Go to the properties of that guy, tell it to allow image to install in unattended mode, and then select my second WSIM script that has the specialized and UBI passes configured. So you have to have both of those guys in order for your scripts to work and to be fully automated. With the WinPE script, you've already authenticated.
So as soon as it boots into the Pixie, it just goes straight through and does the whole thing?
If you only have one WinPE on this machine, it'll boot that WinPE. But then, one of the first things you have to do when the WinPE comes up is you have to authenticate. That's why you have to be in a domain to do it. There's no way, and I wish there was a way, so that you could tell only certain clients are allowed to Pixie boot, but you can't. You can't specify who can Pixie boot a machine because there's no OS there to check anything. All right, those are the automating the deployment. I thought you were going to ask, because I do get this quite often, did you guys notice on that box for the WinPE phase, there's only one script I could add for all my 32-bit clients? Only one script I can add for all my 64-bit clients? What happens if I want to add more than one script? WDS util, command line utility. It does a billion things more for WDS than the snap-in allows you to do. So if you guys are using WDS right now, you really need to pipe that help file, WDS util, pipe it to a text file, go through it with a fine-tooth comb because you're going to find tons of stuff you can do in there that you cannot do in the snap-in. All right, so the number 2 issue you can run into if you rename a WDS server or you move it from one domain to another, you'll have to uninitialize and reinitialize the WDS service itself. And this is how you do that. From an elevated command prompt, this is our WDS util utility, tell it to uninitialize server, and then initialize the server and the name of the folder where you're storing all images. Should kick it off and be happy again. The number 1 issue that I run into, and this is my opinion, it's not from Microsoft, but not integrating with MDT. MDT gives you so much more functionality. It makes your life so much easier to maintain your images. Excuse me. Almost made it. So close. Okay, done. I wanted to show you the options you can add to MDT. Notice you've got applications, operating systems, drivers, and packages. Sorry, guys. I'm going to open a task sequence. And show you how easy it is to change something as big as the operating system that you'd like to deploy. Is that a sympathy cough out there? Woo. So you could come into a task sequence that's been built and change the actual operating system that's being deployed. 2 seconds. Takes no time whatsoever. You can change applications that are being deployed. Look at the WDS snap-in. It's not very flexible. You can add fat images If you want to make a change to that image, you have to blast it out, make your changes, and create a brand new image, and then re-import it into WDS. So this is what it looks like when you integrate the two together. Got MBT and WDS. You can have it on the same server, but you don't have to. We've got a Windows 7 machine. We created an image from, stored the image on the MDT deployment server, updated the deployment server so it creates the MDT WinPE, put the WinPE on the WDS server. You can pixie boot your target machines. They automatically can boot that MDT WinPE, connect to the MDT server, and download your images from the MDT server. You can also allow WDS to multicast images that are stored on MDT. So integrating these two together will give you the best of both worlds. All right. So what we covered, WDS, the basics. Got into DHCP, DNS, WinPE, creating an operating system image, pre-stage settings, multicast, automating the deployment, rename moving a server, and integrating MDT and WDS together. I wanted to let you guys know I'm going to be in the community lounge tomorrow at lunch. So if you need free consulting or want to come by to just say hi, feel free. I also have some business cards up here. If anybody just wants a card, I'm going to set it down here so you don't have to wait in line or anything. You guys can grab that. And where are those names? Thank you. Anybody who doesn't win this, I think Train Signal is selling these for like $400. So you're free to go buy them. Excuse me. How about Paul Graber? Awesome. Paul, come on up. And guys, on that note, I want to thank you very much for suffering through this with me. Hopefully tomorrow it'll be a little bit better. Last talk's tomorrow at 8:15, and it's time to go to the party. I think it's time for beer. So thanks a lot, guys. You're welcome.